Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As we approach Halloween, we thought we would do a fun little special that relates to something that a lot of people have experience with, and that is the world of dreams. But Halloween, you say, what is this all about? Well, what about nightmares? Or what about things that make you feel that you've experienced something that hasn't even happened yet? Or perhaps a prophetic dream? Maybe something like the end of the world. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is our guest who's been on the Beyond 50 radio program before to share with us how we can understand the phenomenon of having such things as prophetic dreams that could be foretelling of a personal life or perhaps the collective's own, like an end-of-the-world dream that's a common experience. We'll also learn about how you can identify a prophetic dream and how to break that down. Our guest today has spent decades of work on exploration in the spiritual field of being able to interpret and understand dreams. His business is Ailing Dream Interpretation. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Michael Sheraton. Michael, thank you for joining us back on the program today.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me back.
Any special kind of things going on when it comes to dreams for you? I mean, what's going on here with prophetic dreams? Do you feel that this is becoming more common as you talk with people?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I get them all the time over the years. I've been doing it for 30 years, and there's a huge upsurge in the amount of them. There's no question about that. And I think it's related to the start of the COVID pandemic. Like in the beginning, people didn't know what was going on or didn't know how to protect themselves because the information wasn't out there. And I think that kind of like our world is ending because we're put in lockdown. Businesses are forced to close. How far is this going to go? Is it going to get worse? That can easily trigger this type of a dream.
Now, what do you typically hear people saying when they approach you about having prophetic dreams? What is their reaction or their feeling about all this usually like?
Well, most people who have prophetic dreams are pretty panicked because they want to know initially that their question is this real? Does this dream mean this is going to happen? Because I don't want it to happen. And of course, end of world dreams are one thing, but most people's prophetic dreams are about things in their lives, like my grandmother's dying or my mom is dying or something like that. And they still don't like them. So most people want to find out that, oh, hey, everybody has those dreams and they mean nothing. But that's not the case. Sometimes they do mean what they appear to mean.
Give us an example, for instance, of you. Can you remember your first prophetic dream about how old you were, what that was about?
Well, not everybody has them, so that's like it's a pretty rare ability, and you know me, I'm all about spiritual abilities and increasing awareness through using them. So I'm definitely in the woo-woo side, but prophetic abilities are pretty rare, and it's funny because with all the fortune tellers around, you'd think it was common. But what I do show people, anybody who does my courses and has the ability. Or even anybody listening in who has the ability, you can tell whether it's a prophetic dream or not. There's always a feeling like there's a tightness around your waist or a tightness around your forehead. And it sounds crazy, but look for that because it's there. And if it's not there, then it's just a symbolic dream. And that's what most people want. So you can have a dream where you dream of your mom dying, and a regular dream just means, hey, let the negative influence or some negative influence around mom die. It's not about her dying. You know, like imagine your mom wasn't around. What would you do differently? Well, that's what your dream wants you to do. Whereas a prophetic dream means, hey, it's a warning that this is likely what's going to happen to mom. And people want to know the difference because otherwise you'd be panicked about every dream.
You know, and that's something important to know, too, because, you know, dreams are dreams. People might look at that as a separate reality or, you know, it's just a fantasy, for instance. But it's really weird a lot of times if you have a dream that actually becomes true, like you've foreseen an event actually happening. And so when you think of something, for instance, like end-of-the-world dreams and the fact that, you know, people actually have these, would you think that they are about the end of the world, or is it maybe something else?
So for some people, it's something else. It's about a major change that they need to make. You know, like dreams turn things on their head. So dream about death is actually a positive thing in a dream. It's about letting one thing die so that a new aspect can see the light, and it's always about some positive aspect. But generally, here's the thing that happens. People who have prophecies, they usually have two or three things in the dream. So this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then there's big events. And so what tends to happen is these people remember three things, and then when the first one happens, then they remember their dream and they get scared about it, and then the second thing happens, and then they hunker down because they're waiting for the third one. So that's a common thing. You don't tend to just get, hey, this one thing is going to happen. It's usually backed up with something smaller.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of something like you've already been experiencing and you just weren't aware of it maybe in your conscious world, but in your subconscious or superconscious. Is that where maybe some of this information comes from? I mean, where does it actually come from that materializes into the dream, especially when it becomes consistent?
Well, your dreams are a message from your higher self to you. Like we're here on the earth plane in order to increase our awareness of who we are. And for some people, they bring this gift, this ability. So their higher selves will tell them, hey, here's what's coming. And then, of course, the next big question is, what do you do with that information? And prophecies, if you think about it, they're not new. I mean, they're a big thing in the Bible. Noah was told about the flood and built the ark. Joseph was told, or the Pharaoh was told by Joseph, that there was going to be crop failures for 7 years. So it's not that the whole idea of we'll be told about disasters is new, but people don't like to be told about them. They just like, it's the same as, hey, your job's going to end. Like, think how badly people react to that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not just your job, it's everybody's job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a different thing altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt about that, that people can actually get very panicked when it comes to things such as that. And, when you think about when they have the prophetic dreams, people may not seem to be happy about it at first, but once they get a grasp and an understanding, you see them kind of taking a different attitude or a different direction about all this?
Most do. Some people still stay kind of panicked about it, and they feel like they're cursed, and they wish, like, why me? I dreamt my grandma was going to die, and then she died, and it's my fault. If I didn't have the dream, she wouldn't have died, and that's not true at all. But so if you're getting a dream about the end of the world or a major change coming, then you can take steps. Would you rather not know? Of course not. So you can take steps to do something about it. Get some extra food in. Make sure you've got extra warm clothes in case it gets colder. All that sort of stuff. But whatever matches your dream, just take the steps that you can, so that if it were to happen, you wouldn't say, "Gosh, am I dumb?" But if it doesn't happen, you can still use the things that you're already spending money on.
So let's go ahead and go through, let's say, a dream that perhaps you have talked with someone about, or maybe one of your own, where you can break it down and give our listeners an idea of exactly what you were just talking about there.
Okay, so I did this presentation, which is why Joy contacted me, and then one of the dreams in it was from Erica. And she talks about attending a wedding at this high-class place. All the guests are like above her station, let's say, and it's in a higher level. It's up above the building, or where the wedding party is supported by two walls. And she goes anyway, wandering in the dream, and she notices the walls, and then she sees a tsunami coming, and she's running back towards the wedding party. For whatever reason, like that's going to save you. But she's running back towards the wedding party, and she goes back in there, and then she realized that the walls on the street aren't going to support the building because the tsunami is too strong. And so the problem for Erica is she's had lots of prophetic dreams, so she knows she has the ability. And so this dream is about the collapse of Wall Street. And you can see the symbols in the dream pretty easily. That high society was supported by two walls, and then she's walking on the street where the walls are. So you have all the puns in the dream. But then the tsunami, so that's the part that you wonder about. Is it actually going to be a tsunami, or is it going to be that there's major life changes or something else? But the main point of the dream, the thrust of the dream, her realization, is that Wall Street can't support the people who are currently being supported by it. And so the interpretation of that is, should you what should you do with, or the question is, what should you do with your money that's in investments?
Yeah, you can see how using something like this, at least taking the steps, not that you have to overstretch yourself, could actually be valuable as far as being prepared, both not only in the physical but also the emotional sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like put your stocks for temporarily into something that's more secure or whatever. Um, but be prepared. I mean, it's better to know it. And the other side of it is, it doesn't matter if you say, "Hey, everybody, this is going to happen." Only a small percentage of people will take action, which is kind of funny, you know. Um, but I suppose if you had a record of, "Hey, I've had 10 prophecy dreams and all of them have happened and here's the latest one," then you'll put a lot more stock into what that person is saying. But I think, you know, I see lots of dreams coming in from people and they do have common threads. And that's what's interesting. One of the common threads is that there's going to be three waves of catastrophe, and with coronavirus being the first one. And the interesting thing is, I was getting dreams into my show well in advance of Corona hitting. People were sending in dreams about, oh, this problem's going to happen and my son's going to end up in the hospital. And the weird thing is, everybody in the dream is wearing masks. And it's like, then when everybody starts wearing masks, that dreamer's like, uh-oh. And of course, she's only wondering, is my son okay? Going to be okay? In her dream, she also had that DC was on, Washington DC was on fire, and lots of other things that they're always very graphic. So I think they're very exaggerated in dreams, but I think done so to make you pay attention. Then I had another person sent in a dream, Jamie, where she was being separated from her husband and flying back to America from China. He works for Boeing, so they live there. And in the dream, they were told, we can't have pillows on the plane because of the pandemic. And she thought, hey, that's okay. I'll bring my mom's 3 pillows that she made for me. And again, in that dream, everybody was wearing masks. And that happened exactly like that for her. Because of the pandemic, she was afraid they were going to close the borders. And she flew back to America with her kids. And she hadn't even thought about the dream at this stage. But then she was told by the airline that they wouldn't be supplying pillows on the plane. And she thought, oh, I'll bring my mom's. And then she remembered the dream. And sure enough, she's on the plane. Everybody's putting on their masks. And it's like she said, it's the spookiest thing in the world. You know, here you are living your dream exactly as it said. So some people like that, when they have other dreams, you pay more attention to their dreams because they have a good accuracy.
Right. You know, and you also mentioned too, when you think about all this lockdown that everybody's been going through worldwide, do you think that could also be because people are restricted or locked down, that it could be triggering a lot of things like this in people?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have no question about it. And I think for 90% of people or more, it's just that, and it's not prophetic at all. Their world really has ended in the sense of they can't socialize, they can't go watch a movie, they can't go to restaurants. And for a lot of people in the beginning, remember, when we didn't know, there was confusion, especially in America. They were saying, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. And so people were afraid to go grocery shopping. And so you had this madness in the beginning because of a lack of understanding of, hey, these are the steps you can take to protect yourself. And, you know, and it also upset a lot of people's worlds when kids were all pulled out of school. And it's like, okay, how can I work if my kids are at home and nobody's, you know, we're all our planning was turned upside down. And that is definitely, you know, even dreaming about the world ending because of that, you could say, well, I know exactly why that's happening, because as far as reality is concerned, your world has been turned upside down.
So now, how could you suggest to the audience, you know, that they're able to take a look at these things and have more of an objective view, like one step at a time? Because, you know, a lot of times people think of prophetic dreams, they might think of them as bad. You know, like, is there ever a possibility you can have a good one? But I suppose that in the dream it also lends clues to an emotional state as well, doesn't it?
Well, most dreams are about emotional states. And so if the focus in the dream is about emotional state, it's probably not prophetic. And the rest of the dream might just be kind of like a play or a scenario to get you into that emotional state. And then other things in the dream will say, you know, this comes from this time in your life, and that's a trauma you need to heal. And that's what most dreams are about. But like I said, prophecy isn't common. And you don't need to be prophetic because, like, you can still have dreams that will tell you what's going to happen in your future and so on. But you asked there, um, are some prophecy dreams positive? And absolutely they are. I um, I was on a radio show in Ireland once, and a guy called in, and he said he dreamed the lotto numbers and he won. And the radio station, it was a national station, and they actually validate everybody that's calling through. And they were like, yeah, this is the guy. He did win the lotto. So it's just interesting. And I've had other people tell me the same. What I've also, though, had is people tell me they dreamt the lotto numbers, but they didn't get a ticket. And then when those numbers were called, they were so livid, so angry, and they've never done the lotto again in their lives. But it still annoys them till this day. But yeah, you can have good information in prophetic dreams.
It's just pretty fascinating when you think about the idea of prophetic dreams. That here you dream about something that is so real, and then it seems moments later, and I don't mean like minutes, it could be hours or whatever the case is, but that very thing happens. And you have to be at a point sometimes scratching your head, as especially if you're starting to be one of those people who see more consistently these things happening. Like, where is this information coming from that I seem to be looking into a potential future that actually materializes itself? Where is this coming from, do you think?
So I think there are certain things that are meant to happen. They're like karmic events that are going to happen on the planet. There's also karmic events in your life that are going to happen because it's going to ultimately be a catalyst for your growth in some way. But there are certain things that are going to happen on the earth plane, and if you're an all, omnipotent God, you can see all this. Maybe even have planned some of it. And so I think the information is really coming for a lot of people is coming from the heavens, where they're being told, look, prepare for this because you have a path afterwards in this. You have a purpose afterwards in this. And again, like I said, you see a lot of that in the Bible. But I don't think that the prophecies are anything of a religious nature because they happen to everybody. But I do think the part you have to question them. I think you have to be sane enough to question them and say, is this possible? And so you look at things like a lot of people are saying now there's going to be a big earthquake or a super volcano, and then you look for evidence. You go, has this happened before, and what has happened? And unfortunately, it has happened before. So it's not a mad stretch to say, hey, this could happen again. And you look at what happened the last time. Something like that happened, and again, it wasn't good for humanity. Ultimately, it was. But for a period of time, for a few years, it wasn't a good time.
I always find it fascinating, too, that people tend to like to conspire, if you will. And a good example of that, for instance, is there are probably quite a few people who, at least older people, who are familiar with the name Nostradamus. I mean, here was this so-called prophet that predicted all these things, and so you kind of try to find patterns, which is what I know people tend to do, is they try to look for patterns. And I remember one time I was out at a place where you could actually go out. It was somebody's farm up in Washington, where you could actually look for UFOs. It's out at a place called Mount Adams. And if you don't see any UFOs, you're still out there under a beautiful blanket of sky and stars. And then there's Mount Adams off in the distance, but seemingly relatively close. And well, then all of a sudden there seemed to be what was a light or a helicopter light that was up on the mountain itself. And the person that owned the farm says, well, that's pretty unusual. They don't usually do stuff like that. And so there was probably a good group of about, I don't know, I want to say close to 30 of us out there just enjoying the stars in the evening. And then pretty soon somebody else starts saying the same thing. And before you know it, it's going down the line and everybody's kind of adding more to the story, where the guy just simply says, that's kind of unusual. They usually don't do that. They're not supposed to be up there at this time of night. And so then, everybody else is chiming in a little bit more, and pretty soon you're building the momentum of a conspiracy, so to speak. And you kind of wonder the same thing about dreams, that somebody starts talking about it. Maybe it just kind of drives a nerve in the listener, the receiver of the message, whether it's something you hear on the radio or on television. Pretty soon they're talking to someone else about it, and then all of a sudden it snowballs. And although it may not turn into a reality, they've already planted the seed in its reality just by consistently reliving it. It gets kind of crazy out there, doesn't it?
It does, and I completely agree with you there. So if somebody has a prophetic or what appears to be a prophetic dream, it's always interesting to ask, had you any of these thoughts beforehand? And if they had, then that's a huge flag to say, well, discount the dream because it's already on your mind and you're worried about it. So your dreams tend to show your fears. So if
Right.
there's something you're worried about because you've heard information, it's going to show up in your dreams. But if somebody has it's not even crossed their mind and here they have a prophetic dream, then again in that case I would just take, well, your first dream is the one that I would say is a good candidate for prophecy. But if you keep dreaming about it, because it's built up in your mind and you've looked for other things and you have more dreams about it, they may not be prophetic at all. It's the one that stands out and comes out of the blue is really the one to. So if you're out in that field and you're not even looking for UFOs, and then you see one, then I'd say that's probably more likely a UFO. Although
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
think they
Well,
are
and
there.
this
But
wasn't the case in that. It was just, a light, maybe there were some hikers up there, who knows. But it was, 11,
yeah,
11:30
absolutely.
at night. But it was just funny how, "Man, that's unusual. They don't usually do that," and then the next thing you know, the story just kept changing and new people were adding on to it that don't even live there. So
But what I like about it is they say they don't normally do that, implying that the UFOs don't normally do that, which implies they already exist. Yeah, so it's like
there you
it,
go.
there's
Yeah.
assumptions already made.
It was actually just quite a funny, experience to have there. But it's really fascinating though how people will collectively start doing that though, no matter how perhaps outstretched or outlandish the claim or the idea is. That if it just feels like it has an element of truth, and then people embrace it, and pretty soon they're claiming it as their own, that you can actually have what I would call a group intention. Could that actually materialize things to become true, even in the dream worlds?
Well, I've read about that it does, but I'd love to see the evidence on it. But it's a very good question. So every let's say thought leader says that thoughts create our reality. So then the question is, if we all believe in something, does that make that reality more likely to happen? Um, it's not my field, but it's certainly an interesting question.
Well, I thought about that too, especially when you consider we're in this COVID-19. You're hearing about what's happening in other countries. I'm sure a lot of people in America are very concerned and kind of maybe even scared about the outcome of this election. Not necessarily about who's going to win, although that's very important, but what's going to happen afterwards. The contention about the whole thing. And am I going to feel safe? There's a lot of prepping language going on. Now, you can just imagine what dreams must be like for a lot of people as they're taking on all this information. What do I do next? Do I bug out? Do I find that cave in the ground? What are my dreams if I'm having any telling me, especially emotionally? And as you say, it's pretty easy to break the process down. First of all, as you said, if it doesn't show any, if it starts to show some consistency, things like that. What are some other things people could take a look at so that they could be better at just kind of getting a good bird's eye view of what their dream is telling them, especially in the realm of what we're dealing with right now?
Well, that's a good question. A person's safety is a big indicator, I think, for the whole thing. So, like Erica, who I mentioned before, and she stands out uniquely in this. She's in a part of Seattle where she's watching protests out her window every night, and she's not
Right.
happy.
Mhm.
And and so you have to say, well, that has to factor into you having these disaster scenario dreams. That's just logical sense. Um, and so then you have to dilute them a bit. So you look for what stands out. So what I look for is what's consistent across everybody's dreams that I've gotten, or across a number of the dreams. And like I said earlier, the three waves of things happening is definitely consistent, amazingly consistent. Another consistency is water going up into the atmosphere, like huge volume of water. In most people's, or a lot of people's dreams, they see it as just a wall of water that goes up and then doesn't come back down out of the sky. And That's not what anybody would ever think about. So that stands out. It's like, well, I haven't read about that in history. We haven't had any reason to think that could even happen. So why do a number of people have that in the dream? So it's interesting then you by looking at a number of dreams, you're distilling out what is different or what's unique among them that you would say they couldn't have conspired on because they don't know each other. But I totally agree with the conspiracy. You can blow things out of proportion in your head, and it's going to make it show up in your dreams.
And would you say to people what may be a question or some questions they can ask themselves so they don't get too caught up into it?
Yeah, so very simply, have you already heard about the ideas of what's going to happen? Well, then you can say that's why they've showed up in your dreams, because it's a bother. And so relax about it. Most people don't have prophetic dreams. It's just not common. Um, and I mean, it's not common at all. Like less than 5% of people would have the ability to have prophetic dreams. And then you also look at how well prepared are you. So, like, do you have extra food in? Is there a few small steps you can take that would tide you over if things went haywire for a couple of weeks? And do those things if it's going to ease your mind. And if you do those things, and then you stop having the dreams, then you know it's just a sense of panic that you have yourself. Um, but yeah, don't get, maybe not watch the news. That would be a good thing.
Yeah, I think that would be a great
you
thing
have
since there's no
lot of
such
that
thing as
panic.
news anyway.
I totally agree. Totally agree. It's propaganda these days, either
Oh,
from one side or another.
I know. I'm sure this is always just a fascinating thing for people to talk with you about. Especially, I know dreams are just that great conversation. Some people say, "Well, I don't really have dreams, or I dream in black and white." But then you hear these unique, common questions. For instance, is it possible to dream in color? Can you actually control your dreams and things like that? But like you said, people having prophetic dreams, I think the reason that percentage is probably so low is these are probably people that actually work at it. I would guess they actually go in with the intention of becoming lucid and free in their dreams, and this is over years,
Yeah,
and then remembering lots of dreams to a point that that
good
sort of
point.
information comes in because your mind now has been sort of trained to do that. Would that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it also, like, let's assume, that it's real, that the people who have prophetic dreams are going to happen. Well, you're only going to be told about it if you're in an area where you need to do something, or if you're one of the people that's going to help after the event happens. Otherwise, it really doesn't apply to you. So you're not going to be told about things like something's going to happen in another part of the world, panic about it. That makes no sense. But you're absolutely right. A lot of people work on these things, work on developing these abilities. And so, again, I would kind of discount it unless they have accuracy, unless they can say, yeah, here's proof of not just hindsight proof, but here's where I've told people something was going to happen, and then it happened, and then I did it again and again and again, and now I'm having this dream. That's somebody I would take seriously. But I say to people, look, it's never a good idea to be afraid or to panic about these things, because when you're afraid, you strip yourself of your ability to reason. Choices made out of fear are bad choices and not what you would choose to do if you weren't panicked. So it's really about, like, should I wait for a disaster to happen for me to wish I lived my life more fully? No. Live your life more fully today. Live like you mean it. And don't wait for a disaster to happen to make you wish you had. And, I love the movie Dead Poets Society. I don't know,
Right.
Joy's big into movies. And so it's like, suck the marrow out of life, live each day with purpose. But you should be doing that anyway. So if a prophetic dream makes you wake up and do something that you already wanted to do, like start writing that book or start learning to play music like you wanted, whatever it is, I would say that's the best thing to take out of them. Take them as a wake-up call.
I like that, and I'll tell you, as we finish up the show here, there was a book that I was reading just not too long ago, and it's fun how you can hear about a whole lot of people, self-help gurus and so forth, bestsellers, so forth and so on, but it always seems that off the beaten path there are these authors that put out stuff that I wish people in the mainstream would actually read because they're really good, they have value, and one of them was actually just about that very thing you were describing, that why don't you begin as an exercise bringing your dream into the waking life, the reality. So, For instance, maybe in your dream you're talking to a good friend of yours you haven't talked to in a long time on the telephone. Why not, when you wake up, pick up the phone and give them a call? Bring that dream out into reality. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it that way before. And how amazing that
Absolutely.
would actually be, and how your waking life really begins to become very enriched, as though you're saying, okay, now I'm stretching this real quick, Michael, but I'm going to take a shot. So there was the author, he did books like Illusion, stuff like that, and he was always talking about usually a center spiritual piece. He was a pilot. I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head. But anyway, there was a dream fairy. And so there was this guy saying, yeah, she says, you were actually really listening to my dreams. And so apparently this dream fairy actually puts these dream ideas into people, and, the ideas wake up and then into your real world. Just bring this stuff out and capture it. And yeah, I just thought, what an astonishing way to think about, setting goals and so forth, is with the use of something like that, instead of worrying about, oh no, another disastrous dream. It's the end of the world. Maybe you had to change your thinking a little bit. Stop watching the news, as you
Absolutely.
said.
I agree with that. It's a good idea, and it's one of the top, like what you said there. I wish I'd call that friend. That's one of the top 5 regrets people have who have terminal illnesses that they share with their carers. So there's a lot of things that we have in common that we know we want to do, and we know if we never do them, we will die wishing we had done them. And that's one of them. Like, call that friend.
Well, one thing they can certainly do as they listen to this today is they can find out more about your work, which they can find at what website?
It's dream-analysis.com. You'll find everything about me there.
Very good. So, do you have any prophetic dreams about what might happen next week?
No, I don't. I just know I think it's a disaster whatever way it goes. Like, no, you're not going to have a whole country happy. That's what I mean by that.
That's for sure.
It's very polarized.
Well, Michael, you enjoy your Halloween, and thank you for coming on the program and talking with us about this. I'm sure as people pursue your website, which is or is it -analysis.com?
It's dream-analysis.com.
Yeah, dream-analysis.com to find out more about Michael Sheridan's work. Michael, thank you so much for joining us back here on the program today.
Thank you. Take care.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and stay up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.